Thanks for tuning in to Operation Revenge. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin the story. The envelope stood out immediately. Thick, cream-colored, sealed with a gold foil stamp, and addressed in elegant cursive that didn't match my sister's usual loopy, heart-dotted scrawl. No return address. Just my name, Claire Winslow, in a handwriting I didn't recognize. I stared at it like it was a live grenade. When I finally opened it, my stomach flipped. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Julia Winslow and Ethan Mallory. Ethan Mallory. The name hit me like a brick. I sank down onto the edge of the couch in my little bookstore's back office, the letter trembling in my hands. I hadn't heard that name in almost 10 years. The last time I did, it was shouted over a chaotic crowd in Cairo, while tear gas filled the air and gunfire cracked in the distance. Ethan Mallory had pulled me into a back alley and saved my damn life during one of the worst riots I ever covered. Back when I was still Claire Winslow, investigative journalist. Not Claire Winslow, bookstore owner and reluctant recluse. And now he was marrying my sister? My name is Claire Winslow. I'm 41. I live in Montpelier, Vermont, and I run a quiet used bookstore that used to be my grandfather's. 10 years ago, I was chasing stories through war zones. Now, my days are more about dust jackets and dog-eared novels. And Julia? Julia was always the family star, the pretty one, the sociable one, the one my parents bragged about to friends. She wore expensive perfume at 15 and landed her first PR job at 22 with a fake resume and a real smile. We hadn't spoken in almost a decade. Not since I came back from Afghanistan and found out my parents had hosted a huge family reunion while I was gone. And never told me. Not even a text. Too unpredictable, my mother had said when I asked. We didn't want to worry anyone. I set the invitation down on the desk. The thick paper made a soft thunk. I was sure of one thing. Julia didn't send this. She wouldn't invite me, not after what happened. She'd made it clear years ago that my life was too messy, too loud, too far from the picture-perfect family image she liked to project. No, someone else wanted me at that wedding. And I had a very strong suspicion it was Ethan. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since Cairo, but he knew what my family was like. We'd spent 3 terrifying nights hiding in a condemned building, surviving off water crackers and canned beans, waiting for the embassy to arrange extraction. He'd seen me cry, scream, rage. He'd watched me fall apart and pull myself together, all while dodging sniper fire. And now, 10 years later, he was marrying Julia? Number something wasn't right. I picked up the invitation again and studied it. The venue was one of those lavish countryside estates just over the border in New Hampshire. White barns, rolling hills, overpriced wine. Julia's style, for sure. But the way the invitation was sent, no return address, the unfamiliar handwriting. This wasn't just a wedding invite. This was a message. Someone wanted me to show up. Someone who remembered Cairo. I reached under the desk drawer and pulled out the old battered photo of me and Ethan taken a week before everything went to hell. We were smiling, dirt-streaked and exhausted, but smiling. I hadn't looked at that photo in years, but now I was going to that wedding. Not to reconnect, not to make peace. I was going to find out who wanted me there and why. It started raining sometime around noon, the kind of soft, steady Vermont rain that made the bookstore windows fog up and the floorboards creak with dampness. I pulled the curtains closed early, turned the little back in 10 minutes sign to face the street, and locked the front door. I needed the quiet. I curled into the old reading chair near the stockroom with a mug of lukewarm tea and the wedding invitation in my lap. That elegant gold font felt like a slap, like they expected me to show up, smile politely, and pretend the past 10 years hadn't happened. But I remembered everything. The last time I saw my parents, it was in their living room in upstate New York. I had just come back from a reporting trip in Syria, my last one, though I didn't know it yet. I showed them a photo of a little boy I'd interviewed. His entire family had died in a drone strike. I thought maybe they'd be proud. Thought maybe they'd understand why I risk so much. My dad stared at the picture, then shook his head. You left a job at one of the best magazines in the country to go chase chaos halfway across the world, he said. You're not a journalist anymore, Claire. You're a thrill seeker. My mother just sighed and went back to stirring her tea. We don't understand why you need to keep doing this, she said. Why can't you be more like Julia? She makes people feel good. She uplifts things. I remember standing there in my dust-covered boots, backpack still slung over one shoulder, and feeling like a stranger in my own house. They had a framed photo of Julia's last charity gala on the mantel. I wasn't even in the family Christmas card that year. I never told them about the time I got trapped in a basement in Mosul, or the shrapnel scar on my left leg. Never told them how Ethan had carried me half a mile after a gas canister explosion. They didn't want to hear it. To them, I was reckless, ungrateful, selfish. The only one who ever understood was my grandfather. He was quiet, like me, loved books, old maps, and dusty letters. After I left for my first foreign assignment, he mailed me a letter, just one, and I've kept it folded in my wallet ever since. "You have more courage than the rest of us combined," he wrote. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for following the truth." I pulled it out now, the edges soft and worn, the ink faded. Just holding it made my chest ache. He'd died 5 years ago. No funeral invite. Julia said, "You were probably off in some war zone," like it excused their silence. The letter was the only thing that reminded me I wasn't crazy, that someone once believed in me. I folded it back carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat. I wasn't going to that wedding for reconciliation. I wasn't going to play the dutiful daughter or the failed sister. I was going because someone wanted me there. And maybe, for once, I wanted them to see me. All of me. Not the version they had written off years ago. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out of the rental car, pulling my coat tighter against the breeze. The venue looked exactly how I imagined it would. Expensive, manicured, and suffocating. A sprawling white barn sat at the top of the hill, draped in fairy lights and lined with floral arrangements so perfectly coordinated they probably had their own Pinterest board. I'd chosen the simplest thing I owned. A black dress that hit just below the knees, clean lines, no frills, no makeup, no heels, no effort to belong. I wasn't here to impress anyone. The parking lot was full of luxury cars, and the people streaming inside were dressed like they'd walked out of a fashion spread. Sharp suits, high heels that never touched dirt, smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. I kept my head down and moved toward the main entrance. There was a sign propped up on an easel near the door, the seating chart. I scanned it quickly, names written in looping calligraphy on a large whiteboard. I found mine wedged awkwardly near the bottom, Claire Winslow, table 18. There was a smudge across the name, like it had been added at the last minute. I checked the map. Table 18 was next to the kitchen entrance. Of course. Inside, the barn was warm and too bright. A string quartet played something classical near the altar, while servers weaved through the crowd offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stayed close to the wall, invisible by design. I recognized a few of the family friends, my parents' old country club circle, but no one looked twice at me. Then I heard my father's voice. "Who let her in?" He wasn't trying to whisper. He never did. I didn't look at him, just kept walking. But I heard the shuffle of people reacting, subtle, uncomfortable, like someone had turned up the heat. "Maybe she's covering the event," my mother murmured nearby, voice low but not low enough. You know, for one of those human rights blogs. A few people chuckled politely. I found my table in the corner by the swinging doors that led to the kitchen. The clatter of dishes and the hum of industrial equipment leaked out every time they opened. The table was half full of guests I didn't recognize, probably distant cousins or forgotten plus ones. No one greeted me, and then I saw her. Julia? She was glowing, of course. Hair pinned in a perfect twist, a gown that looked custom-made, her smile flawless as she floated from group to group. She laughed at something a guest said and touched their arm just enough to seem warm. Her posture was elegant, practiced. She knew how to hold attention. I wondered if she'd even notice I was here. Probably not. I sat quietly, folded my hands in my lap, and watched from the shadows. They didn't want me here, but I was here anyway. The clinking of silverware against glass signaled the start of the toasts. A man in a navy tux, Julia's boss maybe, stood and tapped his champagne flute with the practiced ease of someone used to speaking in boardrooms. His voice boomed over the crowd as he praised Julia's vision and generosity of spirit. Words that probably came from a script she wrote herself. Then came my parents. My mother floated to the mic first, her pearls gleaming in the chandelier light. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our beautiful daughter and her new husband," she began, voice thick with emotion, or maybe performance. "Julia has always been a light in our lives. From the moment she was born, we knew she was meant for something special." I felt the table shift slightly as a guest near me leaned in, smiling too wide. "She's just radiant, isn't she?" I nodded, too tired to pretend. My mother continued. "And Ethan," she said, glancing toward him. "You've brought out the best in her. You're steady, kind, and most importantly, a wonderful match for someone with Julia's ambition." There it was, the subtle dig. Julia, the achiever, the star. Ethan, the accessory. No mention of the other daughter, not even a passing reference. Then my father stepped up. He didn't look at the crowd. He rarely did. He kept his eyes on his notes, glasses perched low on his nose. "Julia," he said, voice gravelly, "you've made us proud. You've always chosen the right path. You've built a life with polish, poise, and purpose. And now you've chosen a husband who shares your values. Not one of those reckless types who chases danger and drama for attention." My chest tightened. I didn't need to be named to know who he meant. There was polite laughter from a few tables, the kind that said, "We're in on the joke." I looked down at the tablecloth, willing the moment to pass. Then Ethan stood. He didn't have any notes. He didn't clear his throat. He just stepped up to the mic and looked out over the crowd. "There's someone I want to thank," he began. Julia smiled from her seat, already glowing in anticipation. "But first, a story." His voice was calm, but it cut through the noise. 10 years ago, I was working in Cairo during a student uprising. Things got bad, fast. The city locked down. We were cornered in an alley, outnumbered, outgunned, and alone. I thought I was going to die. You could hear a pin drop. But someone pulled me out of that chaos. She didn't have backup, didn't have a weapon. She had a press badge and a broken radio. And she dragged me through 3 blocks of burning streets to an embassy gate. I owe her my life. I felt every eye in the room shift. Ethan's gaze landed on me. She's sitting in the back, probably hoping no one notices her. But I do. I always have. Claire Winslow. My heart thudded against my ribs. She's one of the bravest people I've ever met. And whether this family wants to admit it or not, she deserves more than their silence. He stepped off the stage, walked across the room, through the stunned crowd, and stopped in front of my table. Then he bowed his head. Not dramatic, not performative, just honest. And for the first time all night, no one had anything to say. I hadn't moved from my seat. Not when Ethan bowed. Not when the applause broke out, tentative at first, then awkwardly polite, like the guests were unsure what the rules were now. Not when Julia's expression cracked for the briefest second into something raw and furious, before snapping back into her rehearsed smile. I just sat there, hands in my lap, as if still invisible. Only now everyone could see me. When the speeches ended, a string quartet picked up again, the hum of conversation rising with it. But there was a tension in the air now, a shift in temperature. Eyes flicked in my direction, uncertain, curious. For the first time all evening, I wasn't a ghost. I was a problem. "Claire Winslow." I turned toward the voice. A tall man in a charcoal suit stood beside me, mid-60s, maybe older, with a face like weathered stone and a calm, precise voice. "Yes?" He smiled faintly, reached into his coat, and pulled out a slim leather folder. "My name is Edwin Dunham. I was your grandfather's attorney for many years." That made me sit up straighter. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, glancing around. "But your grandfather left specific instructions that I was to deliver something to you, when the time was right." He handed me the folder, then reached into his briefcase for a smaller sealed envelope. "Today is the time." I took both from him slowly. My fingers trembled slightly. The envelope had my name written in the looping, steady handwriting I remembered from childhood birthday cards, and handwritten notes tucked into old novels. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Because he knew there'd come a moment when the family could no longer ignore who you are." He tipped his head, then left me alone with it. I broke the wax seal. The letter was short, simple. "Claire, you were never the problem. You were the proof. You saw the world clearly, and it terrified people who only wanted comfort. You lived with purpose, and they called it recklessness because they couldn't understand it. But I did. I always did. That's why I've left you something that matters, something that can't be stolen, dismissed, or rewritten. It's yours now. Make it better than I ever did. Grandpa. I opened the leather folder. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at, until I saw the foundation's name at the top of the documents. The Winslow Family Philanthropic Trust. Pages and pages of legal filings, grant approvals, board appointments. And then it hit me. Control, he had left it to me. For years, my parents had run the trust, mostly as a vanity project. Donations to local arts councils, scholarships for kids from the right families. Julia had always assumed it would be hers one day. She'd been talking about expanding its reach for years, by which she meant press releases and glossy galas. But it wasn't hers. It was mine. The DJ shifted from strings to soft jazz. I stood slowly, the folder still in my hands, and walked toward the front of the room. Conversations faded. Chairs turned. Mr. Dunham stepped up beside the mic. If I could have everyone's attention again for just a brief moment, he said. Julia froze where she stood near the cake table, a flute of champagne halfway to her lips. I've just completed the execution of a sealed directive from the late Howard Winslow, Mr. Dunham said. Effective immediately, all controlling interests of the Winslow Family Foundation are to be transferred to Claire Winslow. A silence fell over the room like a dropped curtain. Claire, he said, turning toward me, you are now the primary trustee. Congratulations, I didn't smile, but I looked straight at Julia. And for the first time in my life, she had nothing to say. The rest of the evening unraveled in slow motion. No one quite knew how to act after the announcement. The music kept playing. People still sipped champagne, but the energy had shifted. My parents disappeared somewhere behind the main hall, and guests started whispering in corners like they were trying to figure out if they'd just witnessed a family coup. I stayed near the wall again, folder still clutched in my hands, half expecting someone to come try to take it back. They didn't. Instead, I spotted Julia slipping out a side door, her veil fluttering slightly behind her like a flag caught in retreat. She was headed toward the garden path that looped behind the barn. A few minutes later, Ethan followed. I hesitated. Then I walked outside. The garden was quiet, lit by soft overhead bulbs and the glow from the barn windows. I stayed far back, hidden behind a trellis of ivy, but I could hear them clearly. Julia's voice was sharp and tight, like a string about to snap. I can't believe you did that to me. Ethan didn't yell. He never did. But there was steel in his voice now. I didn't do anything to you. I told the truth. That wasn't your place. I made it my place when your family erased her, Julia scoffed. Oh, please. Claire erased herself years ago. No, Julia, he said quietly. You pushed her out. You all did. You built this image of what the Winslows were supposed to be and didn't leave room for anyone who didn't fit. There was a pause. I imagined her jaw tightening, arms crossed. That familiar posture of defiance. You know why I invited her? Julia said suddenly, her voice low. It wasn't some warm family gesture. It wasn't because I missed her. Ethan didn't respond, and she kept going. I invited her to remind her of where she stands, to remind her she gave up the right to be part of this. My chest went cold. She was always the wild card, Julia said. She made everything harder. Mom and Dad could never relax when she was around. And I didn't want her anywhere near this wedding. But if she didn't show, it would make us look bad. So yeah, I sent the invitation, but I made sure she knew her place. Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. She knew her place tonight, all right. It's just not the one you assigned her. The silence that followed was long. Heavy, I stepped back, heart pounding. I didn't want them to know I'd heard. Didn't want another scene. Not now. Instead, I turned and walked the long way back to the barn. Let them think whatever they wanted. Let Julia simmer in whatever realization was creeping up on her. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need to throw her words back in her face. The truth had already done it for me. And for once, I was done fighting to be understood. 3 weeks after the wedding, I walked into the boardroom of the Winslow Family Foundation for the first time. The space was everything I remembered from the few awkward visits I made with my grandfather before things fell apart. Glass walls, leather chairs, polished wood table, and not a single book in sight. Back then, I'd sat quietly in the corner, listening to Julia chatter about fundraising brunches and elevating the brand. No one had paid much attention to me. This time, I was at the head of the table. "Let's begin," I said. 6 people stared back at me. Half of them former donors or longtime board members. The other half new faces I'd personally invited. The old guard wore crisp suits and strained smiles. The new ones? A former human rights lawyer, a refugee aid coordinator, a photojournalist I knew from my field days, and a woman named Kimai, who had run a community outreach clinic in Nairobi until it was destroyed during a regime change. They weren't here for image. They were here for impact. I flipped open a folder labeled Transition Plan. I'll be restructuring the foundation's leadership, effective immediately. Our mission is shifting from legacy projects to direct action. We'll be funding grassroots organizers, local journalism collectives, and survivor-led initiatives in underrepresented regions. We'll also be increasing transparency, quarterly reports, open access to grant records, the works. One of the old board members, a man named Whitaker, gray-haired and bloated with entitlement, cleared his throat. "And the gala?" he asked. "The annual fundraiser brings in a significant portion of our donations." "No gala," I said. "We're redirecting that budget to fund 3 field programs, starting with a mobile trauma unit in Lebanon." Silence. Kemi leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You mean we're putting money where people actually need it?" "Exactly." There was a beat of disbelief. Whitaker folded his arms. "You're throwing away tradition." "No," I said calmly. "I'm throwing away pretense." I passed out a 1-page proposal. "We're rebranding. The foundation will be renamed Voices of the Forgotten. We'll use our resources to amplify people who've spent their whole lives being ignored. The ones who don't make the press releases. The ones like the woman I met in Damascus, who taught math to girls in her living room during an air raid. Or the farmer in Sudan who kept food growing for his village through a drought with no international help. Or the driver who died getting my team across the border in the middle of a firefight. His name was Tariq. No obituary, no plaque. But he was a hero." My voice caught slightly, but I kept going. "We're going to find them, fund them, share their stories. That's our new mission." There was silence. Then the photojournalist nodded. "About time." Whitaker muttered something about idealism, but I didn't care. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not to my family, not to my past. I was building something that mattered, something my grandfather would have been proud of. The wind off the coast carried a chill, even in spring. I liked it that way, sharp, honest, nothing artificial about it. The small coastal town I'd moved to had no name people recognized. Just a quiet stretch of Maine shoreline, a single grocery store, and neighbors who waved without prying. I rented a cottage on a bluff that overlooked the ocean. There was a screened-in porch and a narrow path that led down to the water, the perfect place to disappear, or to begin again. My days had a new rhythm now. Mornings started with tea, not email. I hosted free writing workshops twice a week for young women at the town library. Girls who wanted to fight for something but didn't yet know how. Some of them wanted to be journalists. Others just wanted to be heard. I didn't teach them how to write headlines. I taught them how to speak without apologizing. That was my offering, not stories from the field, not lectures, just presence. One gray afternoon, I sat on the porch with a shoebox in my lap. Inside were old letters, unsent. Some were folded so many times the creases had worn holes in the paper. I had written them in airports, in safe houses, in motel rooms across continents. Letters to my parents, to Julia, to the version of myself I used to be. Not a single one had ever been mailed. I took them out one by one, unfolded them, and read them silently. Some were angry, some were hopeful. Some just begged for someone to say, "We're proud of you." No one ever did. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I just lit a match and watched the edges curl. One by one, I fed them into the small fire pit beside the porch. The paper flared orange, then gray, then nothing. The smoke rose into the sea air and disappeared like it had never been here at all. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't sadness. It was release. The last letter I burned was dated 8 years ago. I had written it after my grandfather died. The ink had run in places, probably from tears I didn't remember shedding. I read it once more before feeding it to the flame. I hope someday they see me, but even if they don't, I won't disappear. I can't. The fire hissed, and the letter was gone. Behind me, the porch creaked. A group of young women had gathered for that afternoon's workshop. A few carried notebooks. One had a copy of The Feminine Mystique tucked under her arm. They weren't here to impress anyone. They were here to learn, to ask questions, to speak out loud. "Come on up," I said, standing. "We've got work to do." They filed in, filling the space with their voices, their questions, their fire. I poured tea. Someone started laughing. The sun broke briefly through the clouds. As I looked out at the waves crashing below, I felt it, lightness. Not because I'd finally been accepted, but because I no longer needed to be. I had written my own ending, and it was just the beginning.